watching you and Dr. Gandhi in the hearing yesterday, hearing yourselves being quoted, having all these questions asked to various people, and I was wondering if you had been able to make comments at that time, what you would have said to Senator Specter or Senator Harkin.
Well, I think one point I think that was not really made clear to the senators was that we actually have quite a lot of data showing effects. And so a lot of time people ask, well, we don't have enough scientific information to make any decision. And so, well, on the other end, people will say, well, there are hundreds of papers published, and the majority of these papers show no effect at all. Okay, those are not true. First, we have quite a lot of information on radio frequency radiation and cell phone radiation. That's one thing. Second, most of the data, at least half of the data, show effect. So it's not true that the majority of the data show no effect. Lots of time when you listen to the industry, the comments is that the majority of data show no effect. That is not true. Mm-hmm. Unless the people who publish it, I don't know.
They were saying basically that there isn't enough data to make policy on it. And you're saying there is now.
Mm-hmm. Well, depending on what policy, I think for precautionary approach on limit use of cell phones or limit exposure to EMF, electromagnetic field, I think at this point we do have very strong indication that we should do it. Even though, because we don't need to prove harm, existence of harm, in order to recommend less exposure. So it's better safe than sorry kind of approach. I think that's important.
Mm-hmm. Carrying on with that, I know that 9 years ago when we interviewed you, you were saying chronic exposure to low levels may be just as harmful as a short exposure to high level. And now
we have a lot more data to indicate that.
Can you talk about that?
Well, so that was 9 years ago when we talked about this, and at that time we found data that this is experimental data that you expose an animal or cells to high intensity radiation for a short time will produce the same effect as a long duration, low intensity exposure. So the intensity and time can trade, right? So now, but in the last, well, at least 10 years, there are well, as far as I know, there are 53 publications showing that very low intensity radiation or fields can cause effect. At that time, we would say, well, it's impossible to see the effect at this low level. But now we do. And we have paper, well, there are 53 peer-reviewed papers indicating that the effect occurs at very low level. Particularly the study on, for example, on cancer, lymphoma, in people who live close to radio tower, AM tower and broadcast tower. And those people are exposed to very low level, but radiation for a long time. So it's like sometimes can be 24 hours a day. And there are several studies showing that they have, people do develop leukemia, a type of cancer. So long-term exposure at even very low intensity can lead to harm, health effects.
And can you talk about the proliferation of sources that we now have and what does that mean?
There's a tremendous increase in devices and structures that emit radio wave, extremely low frequency fields. So EMF as a term, we have a tremendous increase in the ambient level in our environment because of all these new structures. And so, as I mentioned earlier, is that there was a study published last month from Finland, and they actually go to measure how much energy a person absorbs from the environment. Now, this is a radio frequency radiation. And from what sources this radiation came from. So what they found was actually very surprising. 1/3 come from your cell phone. Only 1/3. Okay? So you use phone, you absorb the energy. And 1/3 come from cell phone towers. And the other third, the remaining 1/3, came from DEC phone. The wireless phone.
The cordless phone.
Cordless phone, the cordless phone they use at home. People tend to use a long time on the DEC phone. So surprisingly, 1/3 of your energy absorbed from radio frequency energy come from that source. Now, if you don't, for example, you don't use a phone, that means 50% will come from the cell phone towers and 50% from the DEC phone. So there's no way you can get away from the radiation. And in the same study, they also look at, for example, the amount of radiation inside trains. And it turns out that the train in a confined compartment, a lot of people traveling using a mobile phone cell phone in the train compartment are actually exposing other people to very high intensity radio frequency radiation. Train is made of metal, so the energy will bounce back and forth. It's confined. It's not going out, so everything confined inside. So even though you're not using a phone yourself, you're being exposed. You're secondary exposed by to the radiation.
And isn't that the same in cars?
Well, car, not that many people use a phone. Well, how many people can you sit inside car? 3 or 4 people, even everyone use it, is still not as much as inside a train. You can have 20, 30 people using the same. At the same time, they can be on a phone, they can be using a computer which is connected to a wireless connection.
And now they're talking about airplanes.
Well, airplane too, if it is allowed to do that, using a cell phone. And actually, I think there's a report in Japan that showed that this bullet train, the Japanese bullet train, inside the train, the exposure level exceeded the Japanese allowable limit. So it's that much. They don't know what to do with it because those businessmen traveling from one city to another city, they have to talk all the time to somebody. And so the whole thing so everybody is inside a sea of waves, electromagnetic waves.
I keep thinking we should all wear full body coverings of
absorption material.
That carbon filament material.
Yeah. Well, people who work on antenna, they're protective clothing. It's expensive. Well, Japanese has actually, they have this type of thing they make into underwear. Yeah, you can buy RF absorption underwear in Japan.
They know about the testicular
Yeah. Another thing I think that came out in the last few years is that the people look at the sperms in cell phone. People use cell phones, and then they also expose sperms to radio frequency field from cell phone, and then they look at the DNA. There was damage to DNA, and the sperm, usually sperm swim, and they swim straight. But if you expose them to radio frequency mobile phone waves, they swim in circle. And then there are less sperm. There's a decrease in sperm counts in men who put the phone in the pocket. So even though your phone is on standby, you're not talking into the phone. You're not using the phone. If it's on standby mode, the phone emits radiation intermittently.
So a sperm who swims in circles is not going to find very many eggs, right?
Yeah.
Just to wind up, I'm just wondering what, in a nutshell, is your recommendation to the average layperson about the use of cell phones, wireless technology in general?
Well, for cell phone, I think it's very easy because it's voluntary. You just limit the use of cell phone. And then, I think another recommendation is use a headset, this wire that connect your phone to your ear.